Office of Presidential Personnel. The political axiom that personnel is policy was popularized under President Ronald Reagan during the 1981 presidential transition. One of the most important offices in the White House is the PPO, which was created under President Richard Nixon to centralize political appointments. Departments and agencies had and still have direct legal authority on hiring and firing, but the power to fill Schedule C positions, the core of political jobs, is vested with the president. Therefore, the White House, not the department or agency, has the final word on political appointments. PPO's primary responsibility is to staff the executive branch with individuals who are equipped to implement the president's agenda. Although its focus should be identifying and recruiting leaders to fill the approximately 1,000 appointments that require Senate confirmation, PPO must also fill approximately 3,000 political jobs that require dedicated conservatives to support the administration's political leadership. Frequently, many medium-tier and top-tier jobs have been filled by policy experts tasked with accomplishing much of the work of the administration. At the same time, appointees in the entry-level jobs have brought invaluable energy and commitment to the White House and have proved to be the farm team for the conservative movement. The Office of Presidential Personnel is responsible for identifying potential political personnel, both actively through recruitment and passively by fielding resumes and adjudicating requests from political actors, vetting potential political personnel by conducting political background checks and reviewing any clearance of fitness assessments by departments and agencies, making recommendations to the president and to other appointment authorities on behalf of the president, identifying programmatic political workforce needs early and developing plans, for example, Schedule F. Maintaining a strong relationship with the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, both for operational purposes and to effectuate the President's direct Title V authorities. The President is in charge of the federal workforce and exercises control principally by working through the Director of the Office of Personnel Management. Training and connecting political personnel. Playing backup in a way that other White House offices cannot, including serve as the office that takes direct responsibility for firings and hirings. Serving as a personnel link between conservative organizations and the executive branch. In most administrations, PPO will staff more than 100 positions during a transition and thousands of non-career positions during the president's first term. Direct authority and a strong relationship with the president are necessary attributes for any PPO director. Historically, PPO has had direct review and control of personnel files, including security clearance dossiers. At the highest level, PPO is tasked with long-term strategic workforce development. The bills of political appointments are of immense importance in credentialing and training future leaders. In addition, whatever one's views of the constitutionality of various civil service rules, for example, the Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998, might be, it is necessary to ensure that departments and agencies have robust cadres of political staff just below senior levels in the event of unexpected vacancies. Office of Political Affairs, OPA. The OPA is the primary office within the executive branch for managing the president's political interests. Although its specific functions vary from administration to administration, the OPA typically serves as a liaison between the president and associated political entities, national committees, federal and state campaigns, and interest groups. Within legal guidelines, the OPA engages in outreach, conducts casework, and, if the president is up for re-election, assists with his campaign. The OPA may also monitor congressional campaigns, arrange presidential visits with other political campaigns, and recommend campaign staff to the Office of Presidential Personnel for staff for service in the executive branch. The OPA further serves as a line of communication between the White House and the president's political party. This includes both relaying the president's ambitions to political interests and listening to the needs of political interests. This relationship allows for the exchange of information between the White House and political actors across the country. The OPA should have one director of political affairs who reports either to the chief of staff or to a deputy chief of staff. The OPA should also include various deputy directors, each of whom is responsible for a certain geographical region of the country. Because nearly all White House activities are in some way inherently political, the OPA needs to be aware of all presidential actions and activities, including travel, policy decisions, speeches, nominations, and responses to matters of national security, and consider how they might affect the president's image. The OPA must therefore have a designated staffer who communicates not only with other White House offices, but also with the cabinet and executive branch agencies. Office of Cabinet Affairs, OCA. The OCA's role has changed to some degree over the course of various administrations, but its overriding function remains the same: to ensure the coordination of policy and communication between the White House and the Cabinet. Most important, the OCA coordinates all Cabinet meetings with the President. It should also organize and administer regular meetings of the Deputy Secretaries because they also typically serve vital roles in the departments and agencies, and further often become acting secretaries when Cabinet members resign. There should be one Cabinet Secretary who reports to the Chief of Staff's office either directly or through a Deputy Chief, according to the Chief's preference and focus. The Cabinet Secretary maintains a direct relationship with all members of the Cabinet. The OCA further consists of deputies and special assistants who work with each department's principal, deputy secretary, undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, and other senior staff. The OCA also connects the departments to WHO offices. The OCA coordinates with the Chief of Staff's office and the Office of Communications to promote the President's agenda through the Cabinet departments and agencies. The Cabinet's communications staffers are obviously another critical component of this operation. In prior administrations, the OCA has played a vital role by tracking the President's agenda for the Chief of Staff, Deputy Chiefs, and Senior Advisors. It has worked with each department and agency to advance policy priorities. In the future, amplifying this function would truly benefit both the President and the conservative movement. From time to time throughout an administration, travel optics, ethics challenges, and Hatch Act issues involving Cabinet members, deputies, and senior staffers can arise. The OCA is normally tasked with keeping the WHO informed of such developments and providing support if and when necessary. The ideal Cabinet Secretary will have exceptional organizational skills and be a seasoned political operative or attorney. Because many Cabinet officials have been former presidential candidates, governors, ambassadors, and members of Congress, the ideal candidate should also possess the ability to interact with and persuade accomplished individuals. Office of Public Liaison, OPL. The OPL is critically important in building coalitions and support for the President's agenda across every aligned, social, faith-based, minority, and economic interest group. It is a critical tool for shaping public opinion and keeping myriad supporters as well as frenemies and opponents alike who are within reach better informed. The OPL is a notably large office. It should have one director who reports to the Chief of Staff's office, either directly or through a deputy, according to the Chief's preference and focus. The director must maintain relationships not only with other WHO heads, but also with the senior staff of every Cabinet department and agency. Since the President's agenda is always in motion, it is important for the OPL to facilitate listening sessions to receive the views of the various leaders and members of key interest groups. The OPL should also have a sufficient number of deputies and special assistants to cover the vast number of disparate interest groups that are engaged daily. The OPL has, by far, held more meetings in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, EEOB, and within the West Wing itself than any other office within the WHO. The OPL is the chief White House enforcer and gatekeeper among these various interest groups. It has operated best whenever the Chief of Staff has given it permission to use both the proverbial carrot and the proverbial stick. To make this work, communication with the Chief's office is vital. Additionally, the OPL has had an outsized role in presidential scheduling in both official and political travel. The OPL director should come from the President's election campaign or Capitol Hill, but should not have deeply entrenched connections to a K Street entity or any other potential stakeholder. Some prior relationships can create real or perceived biases towards one group or another. The director should be amiable, gregarious, highly organized, and willing to shoulder criticism and pushback from interest groups and other elements of the administration. Unlike the director, OPL deputies and special assistants need a deep understanding of the Capitol from K Street to Capitol Hill. They should have extensive experience in private industry, the labor sector, the conservative movement, and among the specific interest groups with which they will be asked to engage on behalf of the White House. OPL staffers work with more external and internal parties than any other WHO staffers. In turn, they must be effective communicators and initiative takers. They must also be able to influence, persuade, and most important, listen to various stakeholders and ensure they feel heard. All OPL staffers must understand from the outset that their jobs may be modified or even phased out entirely as the administrator's priorities change. Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, IGA. The IGA connects the White House to state, county, local, and tribal governments. In other words, it is a one-stop shop for disseminating an administrator's agenda to all non-federal government entities. The IGA should have a director to whom one or two deputy directors report. The director must ensure that the White House remains connected to all non-federal government entities. The interests and perspectives of these entities are represented in policy discussions, organized events with the West Wing, EOP, senior staff, and IGA staff throughout the departments and agencies. The IGA can be staffed in a variety of ways, but two arrangements are most common. Each deputy and that deputy's staffers are responsible for a type of government. A group of staffers is responsible for a specific geographical region of the country. The IGA, as suggested above, represents the interests and perspectives of non-federal government entities, but its primary job is to make sure that these entities understand an administrator's agenda and ultimately support it. The IGA must work with all other White House offices, especially the OPA and the OPL, and manage its staff throughout the departments and agencies. IGA staffers must therefore have communication skills, understand political nuance, and be willing to engage in complex policy discussions. They should also not just be generally responsive, but also proactive in seeking out the interests and perspectives of non-federal government entities. White House Policy Councils. As the federal government has ballooned in size over the past century, it has become increasingly difficult for the president alone to direct his agenda across the executive branch. 3 White House Policy Councils have come into existence to help the president to control the bureaucracy and ensure continued alignment between agency leadership and White House priorities. Those councils, as previewed above, are the NSC, NEC, and DPC. Each is headed by an assistant to the president and performs 3 significant functions. Policy coordination. The primary role of the policy councils is to coordinate the development of administration policy. This frequently includes developing significant legislative priorities, coordinating policy decisions that impact multiple departments and agencies, and at times coordinating policy decisions within a single department or agency. This process must ensure that all relevant offices are included, that competing or conflicting opinions are thoroughly discussed and evaluated, and when there is disagreement among White House senior staff or among cabinet members, a well-structured question is presented to the president for an intermediate or final decision. Policy advice. By virtue of working in the White House, the heads of the 3 policy councils will also function as independent policy advisors to the president. This aspect of the role will vary depending on the individuals in this position and the president's governing policy. Incumbents have ranged from honest brokers who mostly coordinate and ensure that all opinions are fairly presented to the president, to policy deciders who largely drive a given policy topic on behalf of the president. Policy implementation. The Policy Council also manages and mediates the implementation of previous policy decisions. Implementation of a new statute or an executive order frequently takes years and involves many and more granular policy decisions along the way. It is essential to have a centralized process for evaluating and coordinating these decisions, especially if they involve more than one cabinet department or agency with differing opinions on the best approach for securing the president's goal. The above functions have recently been managed by policy councils through a tiered interagency policy process. This process helps to identify differences of opinion and reach a decision without having to take every issue to the president. It can be used to address a single question or monitor a recurring issue on an ongoing basis. Typically, the process involves multiple cabinet departments and agencies that have a pertinent role, policy interest, or disagreement. Each policy council's process could involve the following committees. Policy Coordinating Committee, PCC. A PCC is led by a special assistant to the president from the Policy Council and includes political assistant secretary level experts from the relevant departments, agencies, or offices. The purpose is to determine where consensus exists, clearly identify where there are differing opinions, and develop options for resolving the remaining questions. If no outstanding questions or disagreements exist, the PCC may resolve the issue and move toward implementation at the agency level. Deputies Committee, DC. A DC is a meeting of presidentially appointed executive chair by the Policy Council's deputy assistant to the president and relevant deputy secretaries. It evaluates the options produced by the PCC and frequently directs the PCC to add, expand, or evaluate an option or even to reach a compromise and resolve an issue at that level. Principals Committee, PC. When questions are not resolved by a DC, the director of the Policy Council will chair a PC, which is attended by the relevant cabinet secretaries and a senior White House political staff. This is a final opportunity for the president's most senior advisors to discuss the question and make sure that each principal's position is carefully understood and see whether consensus or a compromise might be reached. If not, the Chief of Staff's office will schedule a time for the PC to meet with the President for a final decision.